Hello and welcome to the APS30. A special thanks to the City of Albuquerque, who once a month allows Albuquerque Public Schools to come into the studio and visit with you about things within Albuquerque Public Schools that you may or may not have already heard about. Today we're going to talk about something we're extremely proud and excited to share with you, and that is that for the third straight year in a row, our graduation rates have risen, which means Albuquerque Public Schools now has an unprecedented graduation rate, four-year graduation rate of 73.3%. We're going to talk a little bit today about why that's so important and why it means so much. Some people might say 73.3, so what? We're going to get to that in just a moment. First, I'd like to introduce our guest today. We have with us Superintendent Winston Brooks. Thank you for being with us, Superintendent.
Good to be here.
And one of our superstar principals, we have Scott Elder from Highland High School, who had a phenomenal year. So let's set that up a little. First, Superintendent Brooks, if you can tell us a little bit about what the numbers showed this year and why it is so significant.
Well, let me answer the last question first. When I first came here in 2008, the grad rate was commonly thought of in this community of being less than 50%. It actually was a little above 50%, but within the last 6 years, what this means is that we've increased 23.3 percentage points, and that's just huge for a large urban school district that's as diverse and has as many challenges as a community like Albuquerque.
And you saw improvements, we saw improvements across the board pretty much.
I think the vast majority of our comprehensive high school, well, all of our high schools increased. I think we had a couple of schools that dipped just a bit, but we're talking about an insignificant dip. So when every one of your comprehensive high schools have improvement, you know things are working. And in particular, we're celebrating Highland and Rio Grande and our special ed numbers, New Futures, schools that have, in recent years at least, been thought of as underperforming, high poverty schools. And Rio and Highland as large comprehensive high schools, I can't tell you how happy I am. And this all started actually at Highland when Scott was named principal about, I think, 3 years ago. It's leadership, it's programs like AVID that Highland has implemented with fidelity, and it's just a lot of hard work on the part of teachers and administrators and EAs and a whole group of people. So I can't tell you how happy I am. 73.3, the critics can say, well, that means 27% aren't graduating, which first of all is not true, or they say 27% are dropping out. You cannot equate graduation rates to dropouts. We have a lot of kids who haven't graduated within the 4-year time period, but they haven't dropped out either. They're still in school, they've had challenges in their own personal lives, and they've had to struggle a bit. So we have a lot of kids that aren't dropouts, that aren't included in those numbers. So it's very enlightening as a superintendent to see the kind of progress we've made, but the real work happens out in the schools, and I think Scott can tell you a little bit about what they did at Highland.
Before we get to Scott, the information that you just conveyed is really important, but hard for people to understand. The 73.3 is a seamless 4-year graduation rate for the district. But we also have so many students now who have needed additional time that we have something like 3 summer school graduations. That number also doesn't capture sometimes the kids who are sick, who need an extra semester, all of that, but we don't have a 5-year graduation rate. So the 73.3 is really what we will continue to monitor now?
Well, actually, legislatively, we're required to have a 5-year grad rate. This current administration, Public Education Department, doesn't think much of the 5-year rate. But when you look at the 5-year rate, typically it's about 5 to 8 percentage points higher. And there we're talking about kids like they go to New Futures, young ladies who get pregnant, make a bad mistake, and they're pregnant and they have to drop out of school for a while, or maybe they're embarrassed or their family situation changes, so they drop out for a year, but then they come back. I don't think we ought to hold that against kids. I think we ought to be embracing kids who have the guts to be able to have a very challenging thing happen in their life and yet still come back and try to complete school. So a lot of our new future graduates are within the 4-year cohort group, but there's a whole bunch that are not in that 4-year cohort group. So, but we're measured typically, and most people my age, middle-aged folks, you know, they only think about a 4-year cohort group. You know, in colleges, at one time when I went to college, it was the norm that you got out in 4 years. Well, today, it's the norm to get out in 6 to 7 years, and high school is not too far behind that. You know, I think traditionally we've thought of kids being able to graduate from high school in 4 years. We have an increasing number of kids who just can't do that, and I think it's our responsibility and the community's responsibility to make sure they get a high school diploma, no matter how long it takes them, whether it's 4, 5, 6. But we're talking about the 4-year rate here, which is highest it's ever been in Albuquerque. And folks should know that if you look at a 5-year or 6-year, that 73.3 just keeps getting higher and higher and higher.
Okay, and now we're going to talk to Scott Elder, who is the principal at Highland High School. And Scott, you made a difficult decision some years back, as the superintendent has mentioned, taking on one of the oldest high schools in the city, but also really one of the more challenging. Your demographics are very challenging sometimes, and you have a tough population. You had a graduation increase this year of how much?
Right below 10%.
Right below 10%. Yeah. Congratulations to you.
You.
So people watching are going to want to ask, how'd you do it?
Well, I think what's probably more important is to recognize that it's been 4 years of work, and that over those 4 years it's actually risen 17%. So there's been this incremental growth year to year, but it sort of snowballed last year into a pretty good jump. I was pretty pleased last year when we jumped up 5 points, and it was only overshadowed by some phenomenal efforts at other schools, you know, because we had such a good year last year too. So it's been nice to see that grow. I don't think you can point to any one magic bullet and say that did it. I think what was probably the most important thing is that we never really focused on raising the graduation rate. We didn't worry about, you know, whether it was paperwork. We didn't worry about whether it was, you know, going and finding kids. What we really worked on was trying to improve instruction inside the school and to make the school relevant and interesting and rigorous so that students really wanted to be there and really saw the impact that education could have on them and that graduation really meant something to them down the line. Highland is a unique population. I get nervous when people say it's a tough population or it's this type of population. It's unique. It's in the entire state of New Mexico. I do not believe there's a school like Highland High School. And it's because of the neighborhoods that we serve. It's just because of geography. But we like to remind our kids that they're not defined by where they live. They define themselves. And, you know, DNA is not your destiny. Everybody can learn. Everybody can be successful. You just have to understand how you want to define yourself. And that's been a big key in turning some things around at Highland. It was important for the staff to understand that. It was important for the kids to understand that, and then the community at large to accept that as well.
You're in the classrooms every day. What do you think you might share with people who are watching that they don't understand about how different high school is now and why it's such a challenge to see the kind of growth that you've been able to accomplish in the last few years?
Well, I think if people actually came and visited Highland, I think they'd be really blown away by the type of instruction that's going on in the classroom. I mean, it's exciting. It really is cool what we're doing over there. We do, first off, we've been asked to do more. This generation of kids has to do more and reach higher standards than previous generations. You didn't have to get through Algebra 2, you do now. You didn't have to take an online course, you do now. You didn't have the options of dual credit, but that's an expectation now of our kids to engage in college level content while they're still in high school. Then you add all of the issues that a community like mine might have, and basically they're issues of poverty. Sometimes it's issues of language. We have a huge immigrant population, and just survival, you know, trying to get through. And those things really have an impact. So we're asking more of them than we ever have, but nothing changed on their end. They have the same struggles that they had before. So when you come to the school, what we had to do was really get into the concept of how do we engage students in learning. And we've really changed the format of what it looks like in a traditional high school classroom. It's not just rows of kids staring at the teacher, taking notes and mimicking what they're shown. They really have to engage. And there's a few programs that do a really excellent job of working with us. And AVID's a great example. Going with some standardized skills across an entire school, just in terms of note taking, just in terms of organizing your work. A lot of our kids come to us and they're not 100% sure how to put things together or what it should look like, what should final product look like, because they haven't seen those things. The AVID program helps them work through that, and we've taken that outside of the AVID classrooms and put that school-wide. So all our teachers are showing them some of these systems to help them be successful in traditional classrooms and then beyond once they get out of high school.
Okay. You've both mentioned AVID, and we want to talk about that in just a moment. But let's pause at this point and take a look at New Futures. We've mentioned that we had great improvement in a lot of different areas. We have alternative schools, and we have a story to share with the viewers now that gives you a look at one of our alternative schools. It actually goes back to the 70s, called New Futures. Take a look, and we'll talk about that after this. Babies, we want to do everything we can to give them the best possible start in life, but in the real world, it's not always that simple. This happens to be a 4-star nursery in Albuquerque with 120 children who range in age from 2 weeks to 3 years old. Most spend 5 days a week here. They are all children of pregnant or parenting teens. Their parents are students of New Futures, an Albuquerque Public Schools alternative program. New Futures was founded in 1970 with just 6 students. Today, the school has 183 students. The current principal of the school, Jinx Baskerville, says the need for a school like this hasn't changed in 42 years.
I think what we're doing is embracing a population of kids that are pregnant and parenting, and we're helping them and support them so they can graduate and move on and not drop out.
Support services at New Futures can't be matched at any other high school in the state. Still, finishing high school can be challenging for teens forced to balance the demands of parenting and school. That reality has everything to do with a new phenomenon at the school.
Well, I knew my life was changing a lot, so I had to do something and jump on the right track and get it caught up with my grades and everything. Because it's not about me anymore, it's about what's going to happen, what's coming out of it.
Julian Gutierrez was the first of 4 teenage dads to enroll at New Futures this school year. Word spread, and soon others followed.
My girlfriend, she told me that Julian was going here first, and he was the first boy. So I wanted to go to school here, but I wasn't sure if I would fit in because it's a high school and I'm in middle school.
Dominic Melcourt is 13 years old. Dominic and his 15-year-old girlfriend attend New Futures together with their 6-week-old son, Caleb. Transportation to and from school is provided, critical because neither parent is old enough to drive. All mandatory core, advanced placement, and distance education courses are offered at New Futures, but it's the support services that really stand out. New Futures affords students full-time daycare, health and nutrition classes for parents and their children, a full-time nurse and clinic, a well baby clinic, teen clinic, and maternity run by the University of New Mexico, child development classes, and much, much more at no cost to the teens. Equally important is the school's policy on absences, an issue for any school, but a huge concern for this population.
When the young mom delivers, they have 2 weeks of maternity leave, and then they're able to come back and they have 2 weeks to make up their work. We have a 9-day rule where we have 9-day terms, and the students can take off excused or unexcused 9 days in a term. Well, you don't get that at the comprehensive schools. And the reason we have that is to support them and being parents and still staying in school.
At my older school, they will just get mad because I'll be absent to go to my child's appointment. So over here, they understand they understand what your child is to you and how you want to be there.
It's impossible to know if more teen dads will find their way to New Futures, but experts say they're hopeful.
I've been here about 14 years, and in my whole time as a teacher here, we had maybe a handful of young men, and they ended up not staying. But now the young men that we're getting in now are real dedicated to being co-parents, and they're really involved in their education, and they fit well within the school. We haven't had any problems. They seem to like it here, and I welcome it. I think they need to be here.
Albuquerque Public Schools support the potential. Well, New Futures is the only school in New Mexico that provides all those services you just saw at a high school level. It has been a program that has experienced success year after year, but perhaps never quite as it's shown this year. Superintendent Brooks, how important is it to be able to reach out to a student population like that at New Futures?
Well, it's incredibly important. As I said earlier, things happen in all of our lives that aren't necessarily planned. And I think for most of these young ladies that New Futures serves or has historically served, that's probably been the case for them. And so what's happening in APS, and I think it's a great resource, is that rather than the option being, well, I'll be pregnant and just hang out in my traditional high school, which may or may not be okay for them. They now have a safe place that they can go. They not only continue their education, their high school education, but they learn skills that will help them with their baby when the baby comes. And then once the baby comes, it gives them a set of skills on how to feed the baby, on how to change the baby, how to take care of the baby, and the baby gets to come to school. So there's not that separation factor that also keeps a lot of our young mothers from going to school. At this year, for the first year, we allowed young men to also come, the fathers of the babies, and I think we started off with 2 or 3 or 4. Of course, they claim that the reason the grad rates increased so much at New Futures is because now males are on campus instead of the females. Of course, I don't know if that's really true or not. Probably not. But I think that's great because, again, you have mother and father and baby all in the same school. At least from what I can tell, the success rate of that has just been tremendous. Another great accomplishment at New Futures this year is that 100% of the senior class has already enrolled at CNM. So we're appreciative to CNM for their recruitment of our kids and for New Futures preparing those kids to go on to college.
So before we move on to talk with Scott a little bit more, because I think it's really worth discussing the how, and both of you again have mentioned AVID. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but we do also want to make note here that there were significant gains, as you mentioned, 14% gain in special education. That is phenomenal. I don't know if any other district in the country can actually say that. We're seeing that in all the subgroups, we're closing the achievement gap, as you mentioned. So the big question is, you touched a little bit on it, on being able to add college prep and make school someplace that students want to show up. You mentioned AVID. AVID is Advancement Via Individual Determination that the superintendent brought to the district 6 years ago now. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Superintendent Brooks, and then Scott, if you can maybe talk a little bit about how that works in the minds of kids and why it's different. It's a unique program.
Well, AVID's a national program, first of all. It's certainly nothing that I came up with. It serves about 650,000 students nationwide, many of them in the southern states of the United States. It targets what they call the forgotten middle. So these are kids who, I kind of think of myself sometimes, they're not bad kids, they're not troublemakers, but they're not setting the world on fire either. They go to school to play sports or they go to school to play a trumpet, but, Algebra 2 and physics probably isn't a top of their list. So, and they may or may not be thinking about going to college. Many kids that are in that forgotten middle either don't have the resources, as at Highland, who can even really think that college is possible. And, you know, they probably got a C average or something like that. So what AVID does is it really targets those kids. It really puts them on a very rigorous college path. It has a focus on universities but it's kind of basic best practices of teaching. As Scott mentioned earlier, it's how to take notes. It's how to work as a group. They use a lot of the Socratic method of teaching where a lot of questioning takes part. Just a lot of interesting concepts that not only can be used in an AVID class, but as Scott said, and it's great to hear what he just said, that those best teaching practices, the AVID model, can actually not just be used for AVID kids, but it can be adopted by the whole staff. And I think that's what's happened now at places like Manzano and at Highland and places where they've had AVIDs for some time. The national statistics on AVID's phenomenal. Over 75% of kids nationally that are in AVID are Hispanic. Many of them are ELL. Their national graduation rate is almost 90%. And so it doesn't matter if it's Texas or San Diego or Miami-Dade or Albuquerque, the results are just very, very strong. And it's all about professional development. Highland was one of our first schools to adopt AVID. Many of the teachers there have gone through professional development and staff development on AVID best practices, and the kids love it. We were at Manzano the other day, and somebody mentioned AVID, and God, they all cheered. I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. But it's best teaching practices. It's very rigorous, and it really puts kids on a college path.
And we were at Manzano because, in fact, an AVID teacher won a national award, a Milken Teacher Award, which is, one of the highest honors you can get as a teacher. It's been so successful, the AVID, that it's now, I believe, in 23 of our public schools. And you also made an effort to bring the program not just to the high school level, but to a number of middle schools.
Right. You know, it'd be great if we could afford it, because, good programs like this don't come free. I think on average, each AVID program probably runs about $40,000 per year per school. So we have well over 20. It'd be great to get every one of our high school and middle school programs with the AVID program. I think we're going to add a couple this coming year. But it comes at a price. And with the budget the way they've been in New Mexico for the last 4 or 5 years, it's been really tough to expand. But our high school principals have been fabulous about it, and our mid school principals. And I think that in part, as Scott said, there's no silver bullet. AVID's not a silver bullet, but it's a contributor to the increase of almost 10% at Highland High School.
Scott, of what I've seen of AVID, what part of what's so attractive, and the superintendent touched on, is that even if a student doesn't have exposure or conversation at home about the potential of college, this is a place where they're not just going to have that idea introduced. They're going to figure out how to fill out FAFSA forms, how to take notes, how to really just start thinking about it. Have you really felt that it's made a difference?
Yeah, I think it did. I really do. I think what a lot of people don't understand is that it's an actual class. And so students are assigned that as an elective, and they take it for 3 to 4 years. So that's where the cost is. It's in the teacher. You had to pay someone to teach the class. What was good for us was learning those cultural shifts that AVID puts in kids' minds. So the idea that you can go to college, it is an option for you. And not only is it an option for you, we're going to show you the steps you need to take, the type of courses you need to take, what you need to do while you're in high school to give yourself a chance to be successfully apply to college and then to be successful in college. It's not enough just to go. We want them to be successful when they're there. So that's what AVID does.
Has it been popular enough that students ask for it? Or do you assign kids? How does that work?
Usually they sign up for it, although we do recruitment just like we would do for any elective. So but you're looking for a specific type of kids. So a lot of schools will have interviews, actually. You have to interview for the AVID program. We're sort of lucky in that we have students who've come up through the AVID program in our feeder middle schools. So they're familiar enough with it, and the schools are familiar enough with it to kind of guide the students into the program. They know those kids a little better than we do, obviously. We haven't met them yet, so they kind of steer them into the AVID program.
We have a little bit of time left, and we don't want to ignore some of the other steps that we've taken that have resulted in the really great graduation rates. The extended day, where we allow students in all campuses to stay later in the school day if they have to work or for some reason can't be there at the more traditional hours. We have assigned college and career counselors to each and every one of our high schools. We have put more, I get confused, do we call them ELL, the English language learner teachers on staff, and I think there's so many different things that anyone can learn about at aps.edu that, as you said, Superintendent, have contributed to this. The question now will be, how do we keep moving forward? How do you continue to improve on, it's pretty significant growth, and you know, the better you become, sometimes the harder it is to reach even higher. What do you think, Scott? At the school level, what are your hopes?
Well, I think the concept of student engagement really maintains, and again, taking some of these cultural ideas and working with those communities. I also think recognizing that we do have certain populations that are going to take that 5th year to graduate. We do have students who are in special education who actually have written plans to take a little bit longer. We have kids who get sick. We have accidents happen. We have families in poverty who need the kid to come home and help while mom works 3 jobs to try to keep everybody afloat. So these things happen. So when, you know, people say you should be 100%. Well, life happens, okay? But I don't think anybody, I mean, I jumped up to 64%. That's not good enough. We have to continue to try to work with those kids that aren't making it and get them there. And that's accepting some of these cultural mores and say we can do something about it. Make the school relevant, get the kids engaged, make it tough. Don't make it boring, and they'll get through it. I really think it is possible to rise it.
Superintendent?
Well, I think there's, you know, Scott doesn't need to apologize for being at 64%. I remember not too long ago, 3 or 4 years ago, that we had more kids not graduating at Highland than graduating. And now, you know, the majority are graduating. And he also made a good point earlier where this hasn't been just a 1-year bleep in the radar. This has been something that's been building up. And when you have 17% over you know, a period of time, that's really something to get up and shout about. I think there are other things going on too. I mean, there are no silver bullets again, but the pressure anymore and the expectation that kids take dual credit classes. C&M has just been wonderful for us. I can't believe how easy it is. I wish this would have been the case when my kids were in school for kids to take dual credit classes and actually start college. And in some cases, graduate with an associate's degree before they graduate with a high school diploma. Number one, it saves mom and dad a lot of money. And number two, it gets kids' mindset that I can do this. You know, college is really scary. It was scary for me. College is really scary for a lot of kids. And they need that kind of support. What I'm really happy about is I think our kids, when they go to college, are not going to go and just test it out for a semester and drop out like so many kids do. Some research done at UNM recently says that kids who are graduating from Albuquerque public schools have a better likelihood of getting a 4-year degree from UNM than any other district in the state. And I think that's because of the dual credit programs. I think that's because of AVID. And I think that's because of so many other things that we put in place. So it's no silver bullet. But it's just a lot of things working at one time. I think the other thing that really is helpful is stability. I think, you know, APS, like it or not, it went through a period where every 2 or 3 years they got a new superintendent. And with every new superintendent, they had a whole set of new grandiose ideas. This is my 6th year here. We've been able to actually implement and sustain programs for a substantial amount of time, and I think that's going to continue to show results.
You've also talked a lot in your years here in Albuquerque about having the right people behind the wheel. And I think Scott's a good example of some of the shifting that happened when you came and some principal adjustments that were difficult on the onset, but it paid off.
Yeah, my 2nd year here, I think we made 42 principal moves. And not all of that was popular. We did have to bite the bullet, but I really do think it's important to have the right people on the bus and in the right seats on the bus. And you know, Scott's a great example of that. So leadership matters a lot, and I think we're very fortunate here in Albuquerque to have a set of administrators at our schools that are committed to kids. They want to do the right thing. They bleed Albuquerque public schools. You talk about Highland again. A lot of people from this town, some of us old timers, graduated from Highland. You talk about the Brad Winters of the world. You talk about the Dale Deckers of the world. People who are very successful here in town remember when Highland was a great, great school.
Still
and
is.
They just love the fact that that it's coming back. I had an opportunity recently to talk to Dale Decker and show him that Highland graduation rates, and he got tears in his eyes. So, you know, I think we have a little momentum. I believe in success breeds success. And we're a little bit like the Wichita State Shockers right now.
Ouch.
You know, they're going to win the Final Four this year. They're going to win the NCAA March Madness because last year they made it to the Final Four. Are you taping this or not? You didn't cut me off, did
You're
you?
supposed to do this behind his back, right?
You're not a UNM guy, are you? I'll get off the Shockers. You can cut that out.
The Shockers, it turns out, I just learned recently, it's wheat, right? That's the actual mascot, the shocked
It
wheat.
is. I'll tell you about him sometime.
I never dreamed I'd know so much about that, but I do. Scott, we have a few minutes left. Do you want to say anything in closing about the great population that you have at Highland?
Well, I do think it's important to recognize the history of Highland and know, I mean, it's 63 years old, and there are some great people who have come out of that school, and I would argue that there's still great people coming out of that school. And their stories have yet to be written. And I think for our kids, it's just a matter of having a big dream and then having the support to get to where they want to get. They know what they want to do, and they are smart, and they are tough, and they are resilient, and we're busy putting the tools in their hand to help them get where they want to go. And it's kind of exciting. It's fun.
I had the pleasure of judging your speech and debate, and I was blown away. They were phenomenal. I was so impressed. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
We're going to let the superintendent have the last word, and I want to ask, what would you like people to think about when they hear the 73.3% grad rate for APS?
Well, the feedback I get from people when we wear our buttons around is that that's just phenomenal. People who have a connection to APS and even people who do not. Because they too remember that it wasn't all that long ago that APS was around 50%, give or take, up or down. And so I think they're very, very proud. I think business people in town here are proud. You know, we're recruiting right now a company to come in and start a business here in Albuquerque. I was told that our graduation rate was 73.3, and they were thrilled. You know, the national graduation rate is about 70, and that includes small rural districts where you have sometimes only 3 seniors. So to have a large urban district, and large urbans usually have a grad rate of somewhere around 62%, but to have a large urban as diversified as we are and with the poverty and challenges that we have here, to have a 73.3 is, you know, you're never a prophet in your own land. But people outside of Albuquerque really are really impressed with what we've done here.
So congratulations to everyone, because we couldn't do it without the entire community.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining us today, and thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next month with a new topic. In the meantime, if you have any questions or are interested in learning more, you can always tune in to aps.edu on your computer. Thanks for watching.